All right, so but another request we had for some word coaching. We're gonna actually hop right into this. First things I want to talk about is we're going to be going over some pounce, cutting pounce versus not cutting pounce on the initial burst, because that's the first mistake that I see in this example of word footage. So this is actually something I pulled up in Vegas. I recorded this just to give you the actual hard numbers on this. Essentially, the question is it worth using pounce and then eye gouge into claws on your opener, or is it worth just cutting, like letting pounce do its like an animation, then the stun, and then going claws, eye gouge, and then going on from there? It might be like a maul or something like this, because this is actually extremely common. A lot of your top warg guys that you'll see on YouTube, some of the old school stuff, even like the old Bloodtail videos, very few of them actually cut pounce like this. And it's actually a really big mistake. And we're going to talk about why that is, and we're going to give you the actual hard numbers and why it's a mistake. So the first thing you can see here, I'm actually pull this up just a little bit wider, is when we're measuring the efficacy of the strategy is when does the stun actually apply? Does it apply immediately upon using the animation? Does it apply at the end of the animation? Because if it applies, the stun applies at the end of the animation, then it's less important that you cut the animation, because if the stun isn't applied to the very end, you're not wasting pounce animation time on skills that you could be doing otherwise. In other words, if I use pounce and the entire duration of the animation, the stun hasn't applied until the very end, then that means I can use all the stun time after that for doing claws, eye gouge, things like this. But if the stun happens halfway through the animation, that means that this section right here is wasted DPS that it could be doing while I'm waiting for pounce to finish its animation. And we're going to find out it is actually applied halfway through the animation. So if we go frame by frame here, I'm starting to rear back up on my hind legs, and I just landed right there. And in fact, the frame here is right here. I haven't even come out of stealth yet, technically. The pounce has not even completed its animation yet. I'm on the way down, and the stun is applied. That's the frame right there where it's actually applied. And so any time that I'm spent animating pounce after this is officially wasted DPS. But not only that, but the other important parameter is that you're trying to get claws used as quickly as possible after the stun is applied. So not only is the animation of pounce not cut, the reason why that's bad is because we need to be clawsing as soon as we can. And I want you guys to watch from 46 frames all the way until, let's see when claws is actually used here. I'm spamming it at this point in time all the way into 35. So that means from 46 to 35, it's 60 frames per second. It's 49/60. It's essentially 49/60. I believe it's just like 81% of a second. So 0.81 of a second is spent, wasted, essentially, before that clause is able to be used. So we compare that with cutting claws. So let me just kind of show you what that looks like without slowing it down. There's pounce, then the claws afterwards. Clap, bang. Now cutting the claws, or cutting the pounce, we start from the second, or from the frame the stun animation. You can see the little stun notification there is applied. Nothing there. So 4.02, 2 frames in, and then this goes all the way to 4 seconds and 33 frames. There's the end, or the beginning of the claws animation. And you notice here, this is with, actually I might have miscounted here. This is actually, yeah, so it's actually 1 frame behind. So this goes from 32 starting from the second frame. So that's actually exactly 1/2 of a second from when pounce, the stun animation begins and the claws animation begins. So 1/2 of a second for me to do pounce, double tap, eye gouge, and then claws. And I take a little bit of extra time here to make sure I get that eye gouge damage. So we're saving essentially 1/3 of a second of stun time you're actually using by you cutting your pounce. So not only that, but also you get your eye gouge used sooner. You want your eye gouge used as soon as you possibly can so that you can get it again. And then also claws is also used earlier in the fight so that you get it back sooner as possible. So less stun time wasted, you get your eye gouge and claws used sooner. Let me just play it to you at full speed. So pounce, double tap, eye gouge, claws. So the only advantage of not cutting pounce, and let me emphasize, the only advantage is it gives you that split second, like that we said, that like less than 1/2 of a second for you to make sure that you're aligned positionally so that your claws after the pounce is positional. For example, if a person is running in circles, it can be a little bit difficult to get the pounce, double tap, eye gouge, claws off smoothly and with positional. So if you're not confident on that, maybe you pounce, wait for that pounce to hit, and then as soon as you see that pounce hitting, you're trying to line yourself up so that you can get your pounce, double tap, eye gouge, maul afterwards. But if 99.9% of the time, and really should aim for all of the time, you should be utilizing eye gouge to cut, pounce into your claws. Otherwise, you're losing out in DPS. Okay, let's check this out at a slower speed. I'm gonna turn down the music, and we're gonna actually check out the speed here. We're gonna go about 0.5. We'll have a little bit of, I don't want music, it's gonna sound terrible. So this is obviously a spar. First thing to notice about this spar is that whenever you're sparring, the reason why this spar is important, I actually need to shut this down because Epic Pen's not gonna want me to go full screen here. The reason why it's important that you're using a spar is so that you can use piercing claws and any debuffs if this person wants to show off debuffs. I will say that in an actual spar, piercing claws is by far the most important skill that you're using because it directly subtracts 5% morale from a creep or 9% on a crit. So it's going to be obviously way overtuned. But let's just pretend that this isn't a defiler. This is like a minstrel or an RK or a champion. Okay. So puddle, by the way, also does not work in spars. But again, just pretending that this works. Okay. Just for the sake of testing. So pounce, and like we said, first mistake here, not cutting that pounce. Like he's stunned, right? Where's my claws? We're waiting for the pounce animation, and then the claws goes off. But if you look, you've already been in combat for almost 2 seconds. Okay, so claws, and even if you were not to count, so we want to see pounce, double claw, tap, eye gouge, claws, howl, maul. That's the optimized burst rotation on most free classes. If you're not going to cut pounce, you would want to go claws, double tap, eye gouge, maul. Then you're going to wait for the animation of maul, and then you're going to go claws, double tap, howl, rend, or double tap, howl, piercing claw. So let's see what you do. Claws, double tap, eye gouge. I'm expecting maul. Great. You're going to frenzy. That's fine. Let's claws again. Fine. So far, so good. And then we should go ahead and be cutting this with either eye gouge or howl. You're not going to cut. You're going to go piercing claws. Okay, a little bit of a weird cut there, and then you're going to claws again. So not super efficient. You are prioritizing claws there, which is good, but not very efficient use of your immediates there. Could have been a little bit faster on your chains to be able to get fit in. You should be able to have. You should have been able to get off this rend here, and the fact that howl has not been used yet is like you need to use howl. So from here, we would want to see rend, double tap, howl. Into either a swipe, or maybe I could just wait for claws again. Maybe you're just going to go for a rend now. You're going to go for a cripple. I don't think cripple this early is necessarily good. Depends on if the enemy has CC or not. If they have CC post burst, then yeah, absolutely, because your Fury Pot has expired at this point. So we'll let this one slide. There's a cripple now. It needs to be 1, 2, rend, absolutely, and then 1, 2, 3, rend, then claws, howl, maul. So let's see what we do here. So you're going to go back to the maul again. So I'm not a huge fan of this. I think it's important that you get your rend up in the first 8 to 9 skills. It is a 14% damage increase in all of your incoming melee damage. Sometimes it's even more if population buff. So Landed Hills, I have no idea how to pronounce that. Call to Arms or Tome of Defense. If there's any sort of incoming damage debuff that the Freep has, remember, it's minus, I can't do this anymore. I can't actually like draw it on the screen. I'm trying to use my hotkeys, but it's minus 10% incoming damage, which subtracts directly from the 30% that Audacity gives. So it's more than 10%. A skill goes from hitting 70, now removing the 30 to 20, and now hits for 80 damage. So it's actually a 14% or even more. So right now, you have to think that anytime that I don't use Rend from here on out, that's 10, 15, 16, 14% of damage that I'm missing out on following skills. And after that first maul, I do think Rend most of the time is more important to get. So really not a huge fan of this. At least now we should definitely be seeing a clause Howl Rend, correct? No, we do not. Instead, you're going to go for the Shadow Fangs debuff. This is a big mistake. So Shadow Fangs is definitely a good bleed. It's solid. It's fine. But this should not be prioritized over your rend at this point in the game, unless it's against an induction class. Like, this is something that needs to get up now. All of your auto attacks, all of your bestial claws would be hitting for 14-15% more. This is damage. The longer you go without getting rend up, the more and more and more damage that you're leaving on the table here. And I still don't understand why you're waiting for Howl. This is an important immediate. You could be using it to chain up your things here. For example, you could be going Shadow Fangs, Eye Gouge, Claws, Howl, Rend. Maybe that's what we'll see here. No, you're not going to. So this is fine, but okay, I'm glad we're actually getting this. So this should be really against anybody that's not like under 1,000,000 HP. You would go Claws, Eye Gouge, Piercing Claws. Does more damage than Maul most of the time. Especially because you're not always going to be able to guarantee positional. What are we going to do? That's exactly what you're going to do. Excellent. Go back to Claws. Now Maul, Eye Gouge, Claws. Just what you do. Very good. We're going to reapply Cripple. That's way too soon. So if we go back to here, when Cripple was actually used here, it was used at 7.8 seconds. It actually applies at 8 seconds in, and then you're reapplying it. Let's see here. Less than half of its duration later. So it's only been active for 14 seconds if you're reapplying Cripple. This is a mistake. If you really want to min-max your damage rotation at this point in time, instead of Cripple here, this should be a Swipe. You don't have Eye Gouge, so you just need to do a short animation skill. Swipe does good damage. It's definitely more than Rend. You already have your Rend debuff. It can't be evaded. Or you could also go Scratch and Snip and then Howl chain that. But whatever this ain't it. This is definitely not it. Like, you have to understand that any wasted skill, if you're wasting reapplying debuffs before the duration has expired, then you're wasting time. That's free damage that you're giving up. Claws, Eye Gouge, Swipe, please. I assume it's going to be Rend. Oh, you're not even going to do that. You're going to go into a Tendon Shred. Okay, I mean, it's impossible for me to coach CC, really, but sure. One thing that I've been working on recently and had actually been a little bit critique from another Warg friend is making sure that you're CCing at the end of the 20-second duration here. So if you look at when the CC actually occurs, there's the immunity right there. Now, if somebody can correct me if they know more than this, I believe the DR kicks in after the stun has ended, so you'd want to stun 20 seconds after this point right here, which would be 25 seconds into the fight. So this stun might actually be a little too soon. So it might be shorter than it should be. Let me actually look at this to see how long the stun is. So it's when is the stun applied? It's stun and it's applied right now at 24.6. So we'd expect it to last probably closer to 3 seconds if there's no DR involved. So let's see if it does. I'm not even looking at the damage rotation right now. 24.6, 26.6, 27, 20. Okay, yeah, so there was no DR involved in that. So it's actually 20 seconds, to my knowledge, from when the first stun was applied. So I think as long as you apply it no earlier than this, I think you're okay. But again, if you guys understand things differently, please let me know. It's definitely something that I'm working on. So going back to the actual rotation here, you're going to cut your Tendon Shred with Eye Gouge, go into a Claws. That's fine. We should go back to Maul here. We do that. At this point in time, it should be Claws, Eye Gouge, Piercing. You're going to do that. Great. Then back to Claws. Good. The overall, the priority on Claws is good. Just the et ceteras are not so good. At this point in time, I'm still questioning why Howl has not been used. We're going to Rend here instead of Swipe. That's another mistake. Rend, Eye Gouge, Claws. There's our Maul. Claws, Eye Gouge, Swipe, please. I'm begging you. So you're going to Claws and then you're going to reapply Shadow Fangs. That's fine. Shadow Fangs is fine. The only reason why you might not want to reapply Shadow Fangs is because you might be fishing for Cripple plus Pounce procs for stun. But at this point in time, it's probably not necessary because you still have Disappear available. You generally only start to prioritize that later in the fight. Okay, so Cripple, Eye Gouge, or Shadow Fangs, Eye Gouge, Claws. We're gonna swipe this, okay? And then it should be Claws, Eye Gouge, Piercing Claws. That's what we're going to do. That's good. Back to Claws. Still waiting on Howl to be used. I'm not sure if you just do not use Howl or not used to using it, but this is like right now, you could be going Claws, Howl, Rend. instantly. It's only a little bit of damage, but it's just worth it. It's a silence, right? It's not a huge debuff for a lot of classes, but it's something. It's something. It's their forces are removable against a lot of light armors. It's really, really strong. I don't know why you're sitting on this. There's a reapply of Frenzy, but again, we're seeing the cripple a little too early, right? Now, this isn't as bad. I believe this has been 23 seconds, so this is okay. But again, here, it maybe not 100% necessary. I think here, it's fine because you used Frenzy, so there really is no damaging skill that you can do. But yeah. Claws, Eye Gouge, Rend. That chain was really slow. Okay, you're actually going to go for Maul. Just wait for it to come off of cooldown. That's fine. And right here now, let's see what we got. You're going to Puddle, Disappear. And so again, this CC was with over 20 seconds since the last one, so we expect a full stun here again. Let's see, Pounce, Eye Gouge, Claws. So the Pounce just happened, 50.9. Pounce, Eye Gouge, Claws. Now, see, again, you're not cutting your Pounce. That's a big problem. You're letting the entire Pounce animation go, and the stun is applying and applying and applying and applying and applying, and you've wasted almost a full second on the stun before you can actually get it off. Claws, Eye Gouge, Piercing Claws. Claws, Howl, Rin. I'm begging you. Still no Howl. That's a big problem with your rotation, man. You've done a lot of good things here, but this is a big, 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 big problem. Okay, Maul, Eye Gouge, Claws. There's the stun break. Rend should be a swipe. The Rend debuff is still active. You do not need to use Rend if the Rend debuff is still active. Claws, you're not going to use your Eye Gouge. Interesting. You could have gone Claws, Eye Gouge, swipe there. That was a very late Eye Gouge there. Claws. Maul. Let's go back to Claws, Eye Gouge, Piercing Claws. You're going to do that. Excellent. Claws again. There's the swipe. That's good. But ironically, the one time you use swipe, you get it wrong. At this point in time, you should absolutely be going for Scratch and Snip, Eye Gouge, Claws. Unless we're dealing with something with a lot of BPE. Scratch and Snip does do more damage than Eye Gouge, or than swipe, and you have Eye Gouge available. You should be using Scratch and Snip. Maybe even consider using Puddle at this point. Scratch and Snip, or swipe, Eye Gouge. Oh, that's weird. You don't cut Scratch and Snip. Very weird. You should have cut your swipe animation here. See? Use the Eye Gouge and then go right into your Claws, but you don't. That's a problem. Back to your Maul. Howl is still sitting there looking lonely. This is offensive to Howls everywhere. And then you're going to Scratch and Snip into Eye Gouge. Oh, there's the Howl cut. And you're going to cut Howl with Eye Gouge. The insult to injury. The one time you finally use your immediate, and then you use another immediate to cut an immediate. Oh, goodness gracious. My eyes. Okay, so if we could grade this rotation on an American scale, A, B, C, D, F, I would give it a B+. You need to clean up your Howl usage. The Howl usage and the lack of Pounce cutting were the big problems, the two biggest problems. The Rend versus swipe versus Scratch and Snip issues, the reapplying of cripple, those things I can live with. It's not great, it's not min-maxing, but they are very much details. But you're missing out on optimal burst at the beginning of fight, and because you're not utilizing your immediates properly. You're not using Howl at all, and then you're not cutting Pounce, so you're losing out on about a third of a second, which adds up, right? That could be the difference between a positional clause and non-positional clause. I mean, even if we look at your DPS here, on a Freak, this is going to be easily double this. If you're missing out on a third of your DPS here, you're missing out on like 40k damage on average, 35, 40k damage with positional. Maybe not that much. 35k damage you're just leaving in the trash can. That's just free every single time you stun, which in a fight this long, you're going to be getting a Disappear Pounce proc as well, and you're messing that one up too. So you could be missing out from anywhere from 50 to even 100k worth of damage just through that mistake alone. And then the second thing with the Howl, that's again another 30, 40k damage, as well as the initial silence actually being applied early on in the fight. So clean those things up. Those are the priorities I would give for you. And I'll see you guys in the next session.